The words cracked through the open office like a sudden storm. Conversations died mid-sentence. Keyboards stopped clicking. Even the quiet hum of the printers seemed to fade as everyone turned, pretending not to stare. Clara's hand froze on the glass door handle. For 3 months, she had worked as the new executive assistant to Daniel Hayes, the youngest CEO the company had ever appointed. The building itself seemed to reflect him. Sharp edges, polished marble floors, walls of glass that revealed everything and nothing at the same time. Efficient, impressive, untouchable. And so was he. At least, that was what she had told herself every single day. She stood there now, heart pounding so loudly she was certain the entire floor could hear it. In her leather bag rested a neatly folded resignation letter. She had rewritten it 6 times the night before, making sure the tone was professional, grateful, distant. Especially distant. Distance was necessary. Because somewhere between scheduling meetings, preparing presentations, and staying late to organize international calls, she had made a dangerous mistake. She had fallen in love with her boss. It hadn't happened all at once. It was in the small things. The way Daniel always thanked the cleaning staff by name. The way his sharp, commanding voice softened slightly when he asked her if she had eaten lunch. The rare, fleeting smiles that appeared when she solved a crisis before he even noticed it forming. To everyone else, he was intimidating, calculated, brilliant. To her, he was human. And that was the problem. Clara knew the rules. Office romances were complicated. A relationship between a CEO and his assistant. Impossible. Even if he ever felt something, which she was certain he didn't, it would create whispers, accusations, scandal. She had worked too hard to build her career to let her emotions ruin it. So she chose the only solution that protected both of them. Leave. She had planned everything carefully. She would submit her resignation in the morning. Thank him for the opportunity. Finish the week professionally. Walk away with dignity before her heart betrayed her any further. But she hadn't prepared for this. Don't go, please, Daniel repeated, stepping out of his glass-walled office. He never raised his voice. Not like that. Clara slowly turned around. The entire staff suddenly found intense interest in their screens. Phones were lifted, papers shuffled, but the air was thick with curiosity. Daniel's usual composure was gone. His tie was slightly loosened, his jaw tight, eyes fixed entirely on her. There was something unfamiliar in his expression, something almost desperate. You can't just walk out like this, he said, quieter now but no less intense. She swallowed. I submitted my resignation, sir. The word sir felt like a wall between them. His gaze flickered at the formality. This isn't about paperwork, he replied. We can talk about whatever's bothering you. If only you knew, she thought. What was bothering her wasn't the workload. It wasn't the long hours or the pressure. It was the way her chest tightened every time he stood too close. The way her thoughts drifted to him long after she left the office. The way she imagined impossible futures she had no right to imagine. I think it's best, she said softly, though her voice trembled despite her effort. Silence stretched between them. For a moment, Clara saw not the powerful CEO commanding billion-dollar decisions, but a man struggling to understand why someone he relied on was slipping away. Her fingers tightened around the door handle again. If she stayed another second, she might confess everything. And that would change everything. Control over numbers. Control over negotiations. Control over rooms filled with powerful people twice his age. At 34, he had turned a struggling corporation into a global force. Investors admired him. Competitors studied him. Employees respected, and sometimes feared, him. But as Clara stood near the glass door with her resignation letter in her bag, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Loss. When she had walked into his office that morning and placed the envelope on his desk, he assumed it was another document needing his signature. He hadn't even looked up at first. Only when her voice sounded unusually formal did he sense something was wrong. I'd like to submit my resignation. The words replayed in his mind like an echo that refused to fade. At first, he thought it was about workload. The position was demanding. His schedule was relentless. International calls at midnight. Emergency meetings at dawn. Perhaps he had pushed too hard. He was known for expecting excellence, and Clara delivered it flawlessly. Maybe too flawlessly. Maybe she had been silently drowning under expectations he never noticed. But as the day passed, something about it didn't make sense. Clara wasn't the type to quit impulsively. She was organized, thoughtful, composed. In 3 months, she had memorized his preferences, anticipated his needs, and managed crises before they reached his desk. She didn't just assist him, she understood him. And that terrified him more than he cared to admit. Because somewhere between late-night strategy sessions and shared elevator rides in exhausted silence, Clara had become more than an employee. She had become the calm in his chaos. He noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she concentrated. The way her brow furrowed slightly when reading contracts. The way she tried to hide her smile whenever he made a rare, dry joke. Small details. Dangerous details. Daniel had spent years building walls between his professional and personal life. Relationships were distractions. Emotions were weaknesses competitors could exploit. He had convinced himself that loneliness was the price of ambition. Then Clara arrived, and suddenly, he found himself looking for her at the end of long meetings. Waiting for her quiet, "You handled that well," after tense negotiations. Feeling an unexpected warmth when she entered the room. He told himself it was appreciation. Respect. Nothing more. But when she said she was leaving, his chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with business efficiency. Now, as she stood near the door, her fingers wrapped around the handle, Daniel realized something uncomfortable. He didn't want her to go, not because replacing her would be inconvenient, but because the thought of not seeing her every day unsettled him deeply. "You can't just walk out like this," he had said, though the words came out harsher than intended. He watched her swallow, her professionalism rising like armor. "I submitted my resignation, sir. Sir." The formality stung more than it should have. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If something's wrong, tell me. I can fix it." That was his instinct. Fix problems. Solve crises. Negotiate outcomes. But what if this wasn't something he could fix with authority? Clara's eyes held something unreadable, pain, maybe. Or fear. For the first time in years, Daniel felt powerless. And the realization settled heavily in his chest. If he let her walk out that door without understanding why, he might lose more than just an exceptional assistant. He might lose the one person who had quietly become essential to his life. Clara slowly turned around, her fingers still gripping the door handle, her knuckles white. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought Daniel might hear it. The entire office seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something monumental to happen. She had rehearsed her exit 1,000 times in her head, but now, confronted with him, rehearsed words felt hollow. "Why?" she asked softly. Just one word, yet it carried all the confusion, frustration, and unspoken emotions she had bottled up. It was fragile, trembling, but also sharp, demanding an answer she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Daniel hesitated. For once, his usual calm, calculated composure faltered. His gaze softened, dropping the mask he wore for the boardroom, the investors, the world. He stepped closer, closing the small distance between them in a way that made the air feel heavier. "Because, this company isn't the same without you," he admitted, his voice low, almost a whisper. Clara's heart skipped. She blinked, unsure whether he meant it literally or if there was something more beneath the words. The corporate world had always been about professionalism, distance, and rules. Emotional declarations didn't belong in glass-walled offices where billions were discussed over spreadsheets. And yet, here he was, admitting something personal, something unprofessional, and dangerous for both of them. She wanted to believe him, but her mind screamed caution. She had fallen for him in silence, imagining things she had no right to imagine. She had told herself that leaving was the only way to protect herself, to preserve the fragile professionalism she clung to. And yet, in that moment, leaving seemed impossible. Daniel's eyes searched hers. He looked vulnerable, almost afraid. It was a side of him she had never seen. The same man who closed multi-million-dollar deals with confidence now seemed uncertain, stripped of the authority he wielded so naturally. And that vulnerability stirred something deep inside her, something tender, yet terrifying. I can't just walk away," she whispered, her voice catching. Her fingers unclenched from the door handle, her grip softening as the walls she had built around her heart started to crumble. She realized that her planned escape, the resignation, the goodbye, was suddenly meaningless. Daniel took another step closer, careful not to crowd her, yet impossible to ignore. "Clara, I don't want to lose you," he confessed, and the words hit harder than any corporate threat ever could. "Not just as my assistant. I care about you." Her mind swirled. She had imagined rejection, imagined professionalism, imagined keeping her distance. But this honesty was something she had never expected. It made her heart ache in relief and fear at the same time. She swallowed, feeling tears prick her eyes. I care about you too, she admitted, voice barely audible. She had spent weeks denying it, convincing herself it was temporary, inappropriate, impossible. But standing here, seeing him like this, all pretense fell away. For a few seconds, the bustling office didn't exist. The computers, the phones, the whispers of coworkers, all vanished. It was just them, two people finally seeing each other honestly, without walls, without titles, without fear. And in that moment, the CEO stopped being just her boss. He became something else, someone who mattered in a way she had never allowed herself to hope. And she realized that perhaps, finally, she didn't have to leave at all. Daniel took a deep breath, as if steadying himself for something he had spent months avoiding. The office around them, glass walls, gleaming floors, and silent onlookers, seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them in an unspoken bubble. For a man used to commanding boardrooms, negotiating with billion-dollar investors, and orchestrating entire departments with a glance, this was unfamiliar territory. His heart was racing, and it terrified him. It's not just about work, he admitted, his voice low, raw. Stripped of the authority he normally carried like armor. I don't want you to leave, because I care about you. More than I should. More than I've allowed myself to admit. Clara's chest tightened. Her resignation letter, once so carefully folded and certain, had slipped from her bag to the floor, forgotten. Her heart thumped like a warning drum in her ears. She had prepared herself for professionalism, for polite excuses, maybe even for disappointment. She had not prepared for this, honesty, vulnerability, confession. You care about me?" she asked softly, her voice trembling but hopeful. Daniel nodded, stepping closer, careful not to overwhelm her. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were warm, open, and uncertain. "I thought I could ignore it, that I could keep things professional, but I can't. Losing your presence every day, it's unbearable." Clara's mind spun. For weeks, she had told herself that she had no choice but to leave, that the safest path was to walk away from the one person she had come to care for deeply. She had imagined heartbreak, rejection, distance. She had not imagined this, that the man she had admired, feared, and secretly loved would feel the same. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were relief, astonishment, and a fragile joy she had almost denied herself. I stayed because I felt the same," she whispered, voice shaking. I thought you'd never see me that way." Daniel reached out, gently lifting her hand. His fingers were warm, grounding, tangible. "I should have seen it sooner," he admitted. "But I was too focused on running a company, on being the CEO everyone expects me to be, and I forgot what really matters." For a moment, silence settled between them, but it wasn't heavy, it was electric, full of possibility. The office noises, the hum of computers, the faint whisper of coworkers, seemed distant, irrelevant. Titles and hierarchies didn't matter. He wasn't a CEO right now. She wasn't an assistant. They were simply two people, finally honest with themselves, finally daring to hope. Clara let out a shaky breath, feeling her defenses dissolve. "I was so afraid," she confessed, "that if I let myself feel, if I let myself hope, it would end badly. I didn't think you could feel the same." Daniel smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened the stern lines of his face. "I did. I've felt it for a long time," he said, his thumb brushing her knuckles gently. "I just didn't know how to admit it, to anyone, especially myself." In that moment, the office, the company, the expectations, all of it faded into insignificance. They stood together, two people no longer bound by titles or rules, but by something more fragile, yet infinitely stronger: honesty, trust, and the courage to embrace what they had both been afraid to acknowledge. And as Clara leaned slightly closer, heart finally lighter, Daniel realized that he didn't just want her to stay in the company, he wanted her to stay in his life. Not as an assistant, not as a colleague, but as someone irreplaceable, someone he could finally call his own. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected, but both had silently longed for: a chance to love, without fear, without pretense, and without letting go.